Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Circular City Week New York 2022, and welcome to this webinar, a panel discussion titled The Next Frontier, Circularity in Design, curated and hosted by Laurence Carr, Inc., in partnership with the Sustainable Furnishings Council and EarthX. Laurence Carr, Inc. has been a proud platform partner of Circular City Week since 2019. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I am Laurence Carr, and I am your host. And by way of introduction, I am the CEO of Laurence Carr, Inc., a New York City-based interior design studio specializing in residential and hospitality environments that emphasizes sustainability, circularity, health, and wellness. I am also a member and a very proud ambassador for the Sustainable Furnishings Council. Finally, I am executive producer and host of EarthXTV original series, Chez Laurence, which highlights companies and organizations in the furnishings, built environment, and design-related industries that have adopted and prioritized circular processes to reduce waste and improve their environmental impact, and much more. So stay tuned for season 2, which is coming in 2022. And also please stay in touch by following us on socials at Laurence Carr, Inc. Today, I'll take you through how we are going to spend the next hour. Our panel discussion will last for about 40 minutes. We set aside 10 minutes for question and answers. And as we go along, please share any questions that might come up in the Q&A section. We will try to address as many as possible. And then we will wrap up. But before we get into it, let me introduce the topic. So according to the World Economic Forum, studies show that the circular economy presents a $4.5 trillion opportunity, and it may boost a GDP by 1.1%, create more jobs, and make the economy more resilient. These findings have fueled circular economy momentum globally. Circular practices are becoming more widely understood and have finally taken a foothold in the built environment, architecture, and design-related industry. But how do we accelerate? What is the next frontier of circular progress? And what impact can it have? How can circularity lie at the core of business transformation? The conversation today is really about implementation, including implementing circular practices for brands, supply chain, management, cradle-to-cradle concepts. How do retailers and consumers distinguish between products that are embracing sustainable and circular practices? We're going to talk about what to look out for in the next 12 months. So welcome again. I am especially honored to be joined by leaders of sustainability and the circular economy movements. We have Ton Søndergaard, Director of Circular City Week New York and Director of Danish CleanTech Hub. Suzanne Inglis, resident expert, former Executive Director of the Sustainable Furnishings Council. And we have Trammell Crow, founder and chairman of EarthX. Welcome, and thank you for being here. Please, each of you, tell our audience about yourself, what you do, and why sustainability and circularity is pivotal to you and your company and organization. Tone, let's start with you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Laurence, for hosting this wonderful, wonderful webinar today. As you so rightly say, my name is Tone Søndergaard, and I'm the director of Circular City Week New York and also the Danish CleanTech Hub, which is a Brooklyn-based non-for-profit that is dedicated to creating knowledge sharing and collaboration building between the Nordic countries and the US. So my day-to-day job when I'm not hosting Circular City Week, which is a crazy week for us, is to actually enable a lot of companies, organizations, and stakeholders to connect with one another, not only on circular economy, but also on everything what we call clean and green. So circular economy is for sure sort of pivotal for what we do, but you will also see us do a lot of work within spaces like renewable energy or city planning, as that's also, of course, areas where there's lots of interest on both sides of the pond. Also, I guess sort of my role in all of this is to try and develop our next projects, our next strategic initiatives, that's kind of what I get my day-to-day doing. So thank you for having me today.
You're very welcome. It's great to have you here. Suzanne, please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, Laurence. I really appreciate being included on this august panel for this important discussion. I am Susan Inglis, as you said, and I have been involved since we began Sustainable Furnishings Council 15 years ago. I have been the executive director of that organization since the beginning until recently, when I transitioned to this role of resident expert, because we've hired somebody else to run the organization, Scarlett Tapp, and I'm delighted to have her partnership in that. And as many of y'all know, Sustainable Furnishings Council is a membership organization, and our members, there are over 300 companies involved in the residential furnishings industry in various ways, supplying materials, manufacturing products, stores where these things are sold, and interior design firms like you, Laurence, and like so many others. Each of these member companies has made their own public and verifiable commitment to sustainability, and it is verifiable on our own website. Each member company has a landing page where you can get a snapshot of that company's current commitment. As an organization, we help our members reduce their environmental footprint. We also are about the business of serving the general public and the furnishings industry beyond our membership. And we do that with the Sustainable Furnishings Education Fund. So there we are helping consumers find the more eco-friendly products that we know are interested in, and doing so by teaching them the questions to ask and the answers to look for. So I hope you will notice that our website is full of resources that are useful to those in the design industry and to the furniture consumer. And I am, and part of my role as resident expert is to answer questions. So I'm delighted to be here as part of today's discussion, and I look forward to whatever questions come out of the conversation.
Very good. Thank you so much, Susan, for being here. So we are still waiting for Trammell to join us, and as soon as he joins us, we will be able to introduce him. For now, Tone, would you share with us what key or notable approaches you are seeing leaders use to drive circularity in their companies in 2022?
Thank you. Very good questions, Laurence. And I'm kind of assuming that a lot of the audience is fairly familiarized with a lot of sort of the core principles of circular economy, whether that is upcycling or recycling or alternative business models. And we do still see, of course, a lot of those kind of applicable and applied to a lot of the different industries that is represented during Circular City Week, because of course, Circular City Week is a cross industry kind of festival in the sense that anyone from food till fashion is part of it and are showcasing what they're doing. I do really think, though, if I had to highlight a few things that we're seeing much more of this year than we've ever seen before, it's actually sort of data-enabled technologies or data-enabled approaches to circular economy. I don't think we have ever seen events on blockchain and cryptocurrency before as enablers of circular economy, and how these like novel technologies and novel approaches can really be sort of part of the circular economy narrative, and how they can push it forward. So I really think that's one of the things that we're seeing a lot this year, and that's really new, and that a lot of companies out there is trying to figure out what does that look like for their industry. And secondly, maybe I think what we're really also starting to see is partnerships between companies and organizations that are starting to tackle the what we call tough to circularize industries. Whether that's suddenly trying to really start dealing with what do we do with car batteries from the many electrical vehicles that we're now all starting to drive around in. Or what do we actually do with plastic that isn't just that easy to recycle, and then how do we go about that? So I really do think that that's some of the new things that we're starting to see within Circular City Week here in 2022. There's tons of other things, but we'll probably go into that later on. So yeah.
Fantastic, Tone. Thank you so much. I see that Trammell is here. Trammell, welcome. Thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you, Laurence. Sorry I'm late. Technical difficulties.
No problem at all. Would you please introduce yourself? Tell our audience about what you do, EarthX, and what and why sustainability and circularity is pivotal to your business and your organization.
Circularity should be pivotal to all businesses. We're in the trade show business, if you will, expo and conferences. So circularity plays a small part in our operations, sustainability, but it permeates all of our conferences. My name is Trammell Crow. I'm from Dallas, Texas. We have an Earth Day that we started 10 years ago, which we call EarthX. When we canceled in 2020, we had 700 exhibitors, 12 conferences, 450 speakers. So it's the largest thing going for a public gathering on Earth Day in the world. And then our conferences address all different issues. We haven't had a circularity conference per se. Primarily, we network and introduce professionals from all aspects of environmentalism, from activism to manufacturing and so forth. But the main thing for purposes of today is we communicate to the public.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Trammell. I have a question for Susan. Susan, moving towards genuine sustainability means moving towards a circular economy. The three tenets of a circular economy are designing out waste and pollution, keeping materials and objects in use, and regenerating natural systems. You've been leading working groups at the SFC, which is short to say the Sustainable Furnishings Council, and one of the working groups is circularity. What core issues do you see with implementing circularity in the furnishings industry?
Thank you for that very important question. Circularity is really where all the different aspects of sustainability come together. So as you say, I lead these working group discussions among our members every single week. Sustainability is a broad umbrella term, and the topic of sustainability, as we all know, can make people's eyes glaze over. It is sometimes overwhelming. And so we have adopted a graphic that will probably roll along the screen here in a bit, that there it is, that comes from our friends at Parsons the New School and their Healthy Materials Lab. We think of sustainability in 6 different aspects. So they're all interrelated, but this helps us keep in mind what specific things we need to be talking about and thinking about. So the 6 are reducing greenhouse gas emissions, especially carbon dioxide, maintaining health and wellness in our operations, in our supply chains, and ensuring social equity in our operations, in our supply chains, managing water use, reducing waste, and incorporating circularity. Incorporating circularity is where it all comes together, because none of these aspects can actually be fully considered without considering circularity. It is impossible to recycle textiles, for instance, that have been coated with harmful chemicals, perhaps for stain repellency, perhaps for fire retardancy. You can't recycle those textiles. So that reminds us that these harmful chemicals are not only compromising health and wellness, but are also impeding circularity and increasing waste, because those textiles are now toxic waste when they are thrown away. And of course, we all know there is no way. The other thing I will mention now about circularity and why all aspects are coming together in circularity. We have long, these 50 years that we've had Earth Day, 50 plus years, we have long thought about the triple bottom line of sustainability: taking care of ecosystems on the planet, taking care of communities on the planet, and taking care of the economies that support those communities, that triple bottom line. Well, many of us think about economic issues within our own industry, within our own businesses. In fact, we are all interrelated. And when we ensure social equity and see to it that there is more fairness throughout our supply chains and throughout our communities, we find that when we are incorporating more waste in our feedstocks, we're actually supporting a lot of businesses that are tangential to our own and that we might not have thought of as related to our own. And we're also building new skill sets in our communities. So that is a very important thing for our own businesses too, because when new skill sets are built, new people succeed at new jobs, have new income, and what might they do? They might buy furniture with it. So it all relates together. We all have a responsibility for promoting all aspects of circularity in our communities, and we will find that it benefits us specifically.
Absolutely, Suzanne. Thank you so much. Trammell, my next question to you is really, why did you create EarthX? What was your vision? And then later on, you created EarthX Film Festival and now EarthX TV. Could you please tell us about?
Yeah, it was to increase awareness of all environmental issues here in the center of the country, where there's much less dialogue, much less awareness and appreciation of environmental matters in general. So that was the purpose. Film as a natural part of an expo and film is the communication of the future. So we have created a film festival, actually starts next week here in Dallas, that addresses all issues. And then TV came about after the COVID, when we canceled like the 13 conferences or something, put half of them online and just realized that this is the way to communicate in the future. So we've made EarthXTV, which is an over-the-top platform, can be accessed quite easily, and have about 10 hours a day of product that is new to this TV network.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Tone, in addition to your work organizing Circular City Week, you also work with Danish CleanTech Hub, which is a public-private partnership that is dedicated to knowledge sharing between Europe and the US. I will add that you are European as well. In your experience, what difference do you see between the US and European approaches to the circular economy? And what are the similarities, and as well, are there more benefits to one way or the other?
And that's a really good question, Laurence. And it's one that we, across many of the activities and events that takes place during Circular City Week, it's kind of sort of like centered around, actually, because the knowledge sharing is precisely relevant and interesting if you do things differently. If we were all thinking the same way, it wouldn't be that fun to have a conversation with new folks. But I think, and sort of traditionally, maybe that also applies in different industries, but you can say that circular economy in Europe is often driven quite heavily by national strategies made by governments, a lot of EU regulation pushing different plastic sort of types of regulations or recycling goals that member states needs to meet. And that kind of trickles down as this kind of effect where companies need to do something in order to live up to these different types of regulations. Maybe a little bit in contrast to the US, there is a more sort of activeness sometimes by American companies, I think, or companies over here to really find the good economic solutions to some of these issues. So I think in terms of circularity, we see some of the other kind of approaches that are really sort of getting traction in the US place are those that have a clear sort of economic side to them, whether that's different upcycled sort of business models, or whether it's a product as a service or something along those lines. They really come to scale much quicker over here than they maybe necessarily do in Europe. And for sure, there's no one right way of doing this, and there's maybe pros and cons to the different ways. You can kind of say when you have a regulatory framework, what we sometimes see is that there are some of the difficult things within circular economy. They maybe come to scale a little bit quicker because you create like a really big marketplace at once. That's also often sort of like incorporated with the European governments or cities using their public purchasing power, so their procurement arm, to kind of force or to create sort of a base demand for some of these things. But at the other side, like Americans and the American tradition are so strong within entrepreneurship, and being a disruptor over here is kind of praised and really sort of a thing that you pride yourself on. So you're not so maybe you're not afraid essentially of going out there and doing something that maybe seems completely way off, and that's how you sometimes also come up with a really great and groundbreaking new circular economy kind of inventions or ideas. So different ways, but very complementary in our point of view.
Wonderful, wonderful. That makes even more sense, why you created the Circular City Week New York Festival here in the US. Suzanne, what are the key areas and in which part of the supply chain are manufacturers of products prioritizing? And, we see there's circularity, materials management, and packaging. What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I want to preface answering that question with commenting that policy does make a really big difference here in the United States as well. And so I think our audience will be interested to know that with our partners, American Sustainable Business Network and MEBL, we have a session tomorrow about policy, and it will be focused on policy in the United States. And where manufacturers are focusing is on their pain points, and sometimes their pain points have to do with complying with regulations. So it is up to us as active participants in our democracy to make sure that there are good policies, so we have to make sure our legislators legislate for sustaining the healthy future that we are committed to. As we can see on this wheel, sustainability is complex, circularity is complex. There are lots of things that come into it. So our audience will also be interested to know that we are on the cusp of publishing with our partner, MEBL Transforming Furniture, a glossary of terms about what the heck does all this stuff mean. And it's a glossary of circularity terms specifically for furniture and furnishings. Packaging, as you mentioned, is a very big deal in furniture and furnishings. There are many fragile things that we are shipping to consumers, and we often do not have a good alternative to styrofoam or plastic for shipping those things. So packaging is a place where companies that I know are trying to innovate, and it's a place where we need there to be legislation to drive change. We're going to have to be required to take responsibility for the packaging waste that we generate in order to really accelerate getting good at minimizing that packaging, or minimizing what is waste of that packaging, because waste is just an unrealized feedstock, and we need a stronger policy in our being responsible for the plastics we use, for instance, would keep us reminded of that. Where manufacturers are making big progress is in addressing their pain points. The other thing I'll say is that these days, when we're all emerging, some of us are still at home, as you can see, but when we're all emerging into the world after a couple of years of mostly being at home, when we were at home, our shopping habits did change, and the eco attributes of products became more important to us as the U.S. consumers. So companies are also adopting better practices that they can tell their customers about, and that includes telling their customers that they are using recycled content. In the furnishings industry, there's a fabric called Sequel that is made from ocean recovered plastic, and that is at the spring furniture show we've just had, the most recent trade show. We've seen more and more companies introducing product covered with Sequel and proudly telling about it, because recycled content is something that we as consumers can understand and realize, oh, that's a good idea. I'll choose that one. It's recycled content. So those are big drivers in the furnishings industry.
Absolutely, absolutely. Trammell, let's talk about sustainability and how it has evolved. You have formidable experience in real estate and have also founded EarthX, as we have heard years ago. How has the green movement evolved in the industries in which you work most closely?
Probably in the consumer product area, like home furnishings and lighting and so forth. The real estate business, at least down here in Texas, has very little sustainability that it can take credit for. The architectural community and the engineering communities are going forward at a rapid rate equivalent to the rest of the world. But your average multifamily or home or even office building, from demolition to lack of restoration to poor investment and energy efficiency, we're still, I think real estate in the center of the country is lagging. And I'd say the real estate industry in general has not caught up with the rest of the world. So many investments now are not built to keep ownership, but to sell in a very few years. So they look at that short time frame as when they can reap the benefit of green accoutrements to real estate, which usually don't show savings for a number of years later. So once again, I'd say the real estate business is lagging behind. Mm-hmm. I'd love to hear something more hopeful from Susan about office furnishings, but she's primarily in residential furnishings. The market has overall increased its sustainability in simple ways of small projects, but I don't see, and I'll take it back, the Leeds buildings are just dominating the entire country.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And have greater value, don't they, Trammell?
All right.
I think that LEED is an example of green certification providing greater value, which, as you say, is an important part of real estate development, is adding to value.
Right. Real estate industry has not been known for any much awareness at all of environment matters.
Yes, thank you, Trammell. And I think we also have the LEED, in addition to the LEED, we have the WELL now, International Building Institute, who is also taking, a more importance in the construction and build and real estate. And as Susan pointed out, really add value to any property and investment. So Tone, to create long-term growth and tackle global challenges, including climate change, waste pollution, and biodiversity loss, we need to transform the way our economy works across all sectors and industries, including the built environment, fashion, finance, food, mobility, and plastics. What do you foresee beyond 2022 in the manufacturing of furnishings, the creativity industry, and the built environment?
Again, wonderful question. And I actually think both Susan and Trammell sort of like is starting to precisely hint to it, right? What the movement that we are slowly but surely seeing everywhere. And I think that is maybe the first point, is essentially that more and more are realizing this is the way, this is the direction we're heading. So it's just a matter of how quick or in what ways we kind of doing it, whether it is the built environment, as you say, or within the furnishing industry. I do think, though, that the furnishing industries, what we're kind of seeing these days that is just really interesting, in addition to the lovely wheel that I actually think Susan is like kind of neatly describing the different strategies that companies are kind of applying, it is this mix of a repair movement that is really sort of coming along, but also this like resell kind of space where a lot of the brands are sort of throwing themselves into. I really think a lot of them are starting to look, because there has been a lot of focus on alternative material choices and water use and the manufacturing side of furnishings, for instance, and essentially also the built environment and so on. And I think we're sort of moving a little bit to looking closer and closer also at the end of life cycle for many of these things, realizing that what you produce, you have some sort of responsibility to have a good idea for how to go about disposing of, or maybe that it actually doesn't have to be disposed, but there's a really good business case for many of these companies to take back their furniture once people are done with having them, or when they move, or whatever life throws their customers' way, and find ways of actually making an economic value out of that. And I just, when IKEA starts to do something within the furnishing world and talk about taking furniture back that people would have thought of as disposable, it's come here to stay, then there's no turning back on a trend like that. So I really think that's one of the things we're starting to see a lot that's kind of new, and that we're starting to dare talk about, because brands, and it can sometimes be a little bit, for obvious reasons, hesitant to sort of, because it's difficult. What do you do when you once you put your product out there in the world, then how do you go about sort of still having some sort of relationship with that product or with that client? And do you have a responsibility for it once people don't want to use it anymore? So I think that's really sort of what we're seeing, and that's kind of new.
Susan, let's talk about implementation, the life cycle assessment of furnishings product, and also the design process, including mechanical and chemical process. Are there some areas where you see more of a focus, like sourcing safe and circular materials, designing to close loops, designing with less, think waste reduction, recycle, reuse, or designing waste out of a manufacturing process, upcycling, and designing to extend product life?
Yes, all these things are happening. Be encouraged. All these things are happening among Sustainable Furnishings Council members and among many, many other companies too, believe it or not. But I will cite a few examples from among our members. First comes to mind Room and Board, which is designed conscientiously for minimal material use and best use of materials, and for durability for a very long time. That has been their way of designing. Another that comes to mind for those things, for conscientious use of materials and for durable, long-lasting, heirloom quality design, is Cisco Home. But there are many of them, and these that I'm going to think of first are higher end companies. They're products that cost more when you buy it in the first place, but it's going to last a very, very, very long time. Another Sustainable Furnishings Council member is Fairmob, a French company making mostly metal outdoor furniture, and they have a huge commitment specifically to circularity. They started just as a metal furniture company, and all the metal is recycled. They have maintained their commitment to recycled content as they have become a more complex company and added more materials, which I think is very wise of them. And because, as I said, recycled content is something that we as consumers do understand. I also want to mention Pottery Barn's Renewal Workshop, which is fairly recently launched, but is a huge effort to take responsibility for the materials in products that they're selling. And I see this kind of thing as a huge opportunity for furniture retailers everywhere. When I was a little girl, long, long ago in the small town where I grew up, the furniture store downtown was just as happy to recover your existing sofa as to sell you a new sofa. And I think that we will see that happening more and more. I hope we'll see it in this very same small town again, but we sure have spent the intervening decades trying to sell disposable furniture. We've unfortunately in the furniture industry made a lot of shifting of the model, but furniture is still considered a durable good, so it can be treated as such. And as we, it's another example of how we will support our whole communities when we bring more circularity into our own businesses. One of our members is the National Upholstery Association, and those upholstery workshops are ripe for partnerships with stores in all the communities where they are. Another of our members that I'll mention is the Good Future Design Alliance, which is reducing waste from design projects, many of which are big real estate, whole buildings being converted or being demolished and made to something else. Their goal is to reduce waste by 50% in 5 years, which is ambitious and doable. Yes, Sustainable Furnishings Council members and other companies in our industry are doing things in all these areas. Let me mention one more. I know you've got other people to talk to, but one more let me mention is a mattress company, Naturepedic, for instance, is supremely committed, as many other mattress companies are, to avoiding harmful chemical inputs, which incidentally impede recyclability. And the mattress industry is up against a recycling challenge. Several states have mandated recycling of mattresses, and it's coming to all of us. Mattresses are bulky, too many of them end up in the landfill. And so that is good news for us, that there's this trend to keep them out of the landfill, and that doing so necessitates our reducing the use of these harmful chemicals that persist in the environment and harm not only our health, but also other life on the planet.
Thank you, Suzanne, for sharing all these wonderful and very valuable, sources and examples. It really shows that if we work together, we need each other, and collaborations are key to make things happen. Trammell, how do you see sustainability and circularity playing a part in the built environment and real estate, from now to the moving forward?
Well, it's not my specialty. I'm sorry, I can't say too much about it. I do know there's a crying need to create industrial parks that use materials from each other, and that's happening slowly. As you say, commitments for demolition and the waste of that to be decreased in the future is a huge plus. But to try to answer your question, the architects and the engineers who really are going forward with sustainable buildings can have some influence on their clientele. It comes down to the consumer and making their choices consciously.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Trammell. Yes, absolutely. Eco-conscious consumers are key, as well as you pointed out, architecture, builders, engineers, designers. It is all our role to really show how making conscious choices contribute to the betterment of our planet and people. Tone. To create long-term growth and tackle global challenges, including climate change, I think we already went through this question. I think I asked you that question already. Suzanne, there are cradle-to-cradle best practices. There are life audits, but there is also disassembly and reassembly of furniture parts. And designing with biological nutrients, biodegradable, healthy, and regenerative materials and other techniques. What impact do you foresee as we accelerate embracing these technologies and practices?
Design has a huge impact, and that is the topic of the event series session on day after tomorrow. So I hope you'll join us for that too. But you know this, Laurence, as a designer, design makes a huge difference. One of our member companies that excites me so much is called Loose Parts. They're a small, they're a young company, and they will last forever, because what can you do? You can buy a day bed today and next year decide that you would rather have a bookcase, and you simply reassemble the loose parts that you had assembled into the day bed, and now you've got a bookcase. And I think that is just brilliant, that kind of thing. And I think it's something that we are going to be seeing in more and more companies doing. Now, about designing with materials as nutrients, about materials as nutrients, furniture is durable. We want it to actually be useful as a piece of furniture for a very long time. And the fact is that no matter what the environmental impact of making that piece of furniture, the longer it lasts, the longer it's in use, the longer that impact is spread out, it's diluted. So durability is very, very important, whether something is disassemblable and reassemblable or not. Durability for furniture is of utmost importance. But in nutrients, in biological nutrients, there is a huge opportunity in packaging there. We are used to our packaging being very cheap and being throwaway, and we are not used to paying for the very expensive problem of throwing away toxic waste that poisons our future. And that is, of course, exactly what our plastic waste is. It is toxic in its manufacture, in its use often, and in its disposal, and it is poisoning our future, and we are not paying for that. So when we learn that there is a packaging that is made from mycelium and can just be thrown in the backyard and it will simply become good, clean dirt, we are excited. We should be so excited about that we do not care that it costs a bit more. You know, that our thinking, and I'm sure Tone can speak more to this, our thinking about costs is completely confused. We are not paying true costs of hardly anything. And so I think that a real opportunity for us in our industry is to begin seeing value in the packaging, including the true cost of our packaging. That might be a little bit of what you were interested in my addressing.
Tone, the creative industries, architect, design, fashion, or material choices seem to have a natural tendency to be drawn to the circular economy and the design principles that come with it. How does circularity lie at the core of this business transformation?
Exactly. And I'm so happy that yet once again, Susan has completely given me sort of the perfect to talking about that, because I think completely, Susan, you are hitting on it as well, in the sense that we're starting to talk about furnishings as the durable goods again, right? That is such a shift from, you know, maybe the last 20 years. We've talked about fast fashion as something amazing. And we're starting to realize that there is a cost to all of these sort of goods, these consumer goods that we have been purchasing for the last many years. And I really do think that's why circularity is catching so well on to, as you say, within design, fashion, furnishings, some of these like physical products that people actually cherish and that they select very carefully maybe in the beginning or originally mostly for how they look or their visual qualities, but it's things that we carefully choose already, and it makes it much more tangible for consumers to, in those kind of decision making, to think about also incorporating circular economy. In contrast to maybe a little bit what Trammell is like hinting to, like that's difficult when you buy a new house, right? It's difficult to kind of think about in the same manner, how was it built and what kind of material is inside it and stuff. And I really think that's why these consumer goods are so sort of drawn to the concepts of circular economy, because you can feel it, you can touch it, you can make a purchasing decision fairly quickly on it, and you feel like you can be part of like changing and shifting the world that you want to live in. And I really think that's also what all the brands are catching on to, that there is an absolute imminent and big sort of like generations of consumers coming in that is what they want. It's a no-brainer for them. It's an absolute must to know how their furnishings were produced, or how their clothes were sewn, or how much water was used while doing that, and whether the people who produced it had a fair kind of work environment when they were doing so. So I really think that's why we're seeing these industries taking it up so much, which for us 4 years ago was a little bit of a surprise. We've talked about that too sometimes, that it was like, whoa, how come it that it's these kind of industries that are really doing something, and it's moving much quicker, I will say, than some of the other industries that are, slowly but surely, but not at all are used to sort of like do turnarounds as quick as some of these consumer-based industries are. So I think that's part of why we see it so much. It's, at least I think it's part of the explanation.
Absolutely. Fantastic. We are almost reaching the end of our panel discussion. We have less than 5 minutes for Q&A. Thank you so much for being here. Dana, would you please let us know if you have a couple of questions we can share? Unfortunately, we are running out of time. The conversation has been wonderful.
Yes, we have a few questions. Faith is asking, furniture is heavy to move and store. This makes take back a bit hard. What are you thinking about with concern to how to improve this issue?
I will make an answer to this question. Furniture is, as you say, heavy to move. And that is why when you buy a piece of furniture, your local furniture store is going to deliver it. And probably your local furniture store could take away the piece of furniture that you are replacing. So and this is something that we are seeing. We are seeing large and the more vertically integrated furniture retailers using their distribution infrastructure for also taking back. It isn't happening a whole lot in a whole lot of the chains at this time, but it is being considered. So stay tuned. I think you will see it happening. Somebody has to bring new furniture to your home, and that same person can take it away in the same truck to the same distribution facility where they are going back to get more furniture to deliver more people. So that is and another thing, you can, as a consumer, you can tell your furniture store or wherever you buy furniture that you want them to do this kind of thing. Many of our members partner with Habitat for Humanity restores, for instance, and take furniture that they are not able to do anything else with to the restore. It's just part of the circuit they are running as they're making deliveries. And that plays well with consumers. We love that they're supporting that good cause.
And I'm also happy to just pitch in a little bit. I think you're completely right. I also think there is, a really quickly and growing a kind of network around donation and resale that will take care of a lot of these issues eventually. One of the events during Circular City Week, which I think is taking place tomorrow, is precisely, you know, the city of New York sharing how are they doing a new curbside recycling program for mattresses. As you so rightly said, Susan, we need to get them out of the landfills. How do we do that? And also within many sort of smaller communities, whether that's kind of a college or universities or smaller, you know, where there often is a lot of turnaround in terms of furniture because a lot of people is moving in and out. That can also be, you know, social housing or other places, are finding really clever ways to enable sort of like tenants to be able to share the furniture or find good sort of marketplace solutions so you don't have to move it yourself, because that is completely a barrier that needs to be broken down. So sort of smaller local ecosystems for it as well will hopefully also really sort of take care of some of this.
Yeah, and we can see that happening with the success of businesses like Cherish and the local vault that are really hip places to shop. Yeah.
Right. Dana, one more question.
Sure. Suzanne's asking, what do the panelists have to say about Attorney General Bonta of California announcing investigation into fossil fuel and petrochemical industries for their role in causing global plastics pollution crisis?
That's a great question. Trammell, would you like to answer that one?
Well, I'm not up to date on the case, but it's time for society to realize that companies are responsible for what they have done in the past. And I suppose it'll be long and drawn out, but it'll also be a precursor of what's going to happen all across the United States. And the global youth are a great reason for that. Like you said earlier, the new generations are going to be more insistent. So I wish them good luck, in fairness.
Yeah, and I would say come to our session tomorrow where we're talking about policy, but it is great good news that plastics are being recognized for their oversized contribution to climate change.
That's right. That's right. So we have reached the end of our webinar. You know, please attend the furniture sessions that are happening every day throughout this week, Circular City Week, and you know, even there are some events with the built environment and the architecture. Really interesting, you know, and of course all the other industries, but I just wanted to point that out because this is part of our industry. I would like to sincerely thank my guests, Tone, Suzanne, and Trammell for their insights. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for your leadership.
Thank you. And to our audience.
Thank you so much. And thank you to our audience for your time and thoughtful questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time to go through more. Thank you again and enjoy the rest of Circular City Week 2022.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.